land acknowledgement. So we would like to begin this conversation with an acknowledgement that we continue to both be situated on and serve those who are on the lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation. These are the traditional custodians of the lands and waters in which we gather here today, Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Tiohtià:ke is historically known as the gathering place for many First Nations. Today it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. It is also important for each and every one of us to realize our roles in the colonial project. We recognize that we need to show our support and solidarity with Indigenous peoples in defense of their lives, their lands, and their struggles to live in dignity and justice. Just because we are not occupying collectively does not mean that our individual occupation of land should not be addressed. So that's how we want to begin today. I will now introduce myself as today's moderator. My name is Lily. I'm a student, an undergraduate student in human environment in the Department of Geography, and I also study sustainability in the Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability. So this is definitely something that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm very excited to be present today and to be moderating this panel. So for those of you that don't know, I'll give a brief introduction as to why we're here. 4 years ago, at the height of global climate movement, over 500,000 Montrealers took to the streets to advocate for immediate climate justice action. Within the weeks following, Concordia committed itself to 100% divesting from fossil fuels with the 110-0 method, which means that 100% of sustainable investments would be made, 10% social impact investments, and 0% investments towards traditional oil and gas. This was a part of a larger movement towards being a sustainable, next-generation university. But what does that really mean? Today we're going to engage in a discussion on the progress that Concordia has made in the years since their commitment. Marc Gauthier, the Chief Investment Officer at Concordia, and Amr Addas, the Strategic Advisor for Sustainability, will be representing the administration and explaining the direction of Concordia's investments as they currently stand. While Erik, Chevrier, and Kevin Gould will be discussing sustainability movements on campus, where we have come from and where we are going next. While I did mention their names briefly, I would like to formally introduce the panelists that we have here and just give a bit of background on their involvement and why they're sitting here today. So I'll begin in the far corner with Marc. I don't know if you want to say hi and say something about yourself, and then I can give some other background.
Yes, I'm Marc Gauthier, the University Treasurer and Chief Investment Officer, so my
Over here.
Hang on 1 second. Sorry. Marc Gauthier. It's not on. Sorry.
Well, I can always give you my mic if it reaches.
Yeah, sure. So Marc Gauthier, I'm the University Treasurer and Chief Investment Officer, so my office essentially sees the corporate finances of the university. Our goal really is intergenerational wealth to protect it and to grow it for the future, not only to the student body, but the future administration, to make sure the university is sustainable over the long term. So we have 4 divisions overseeing benefits, investments, corporate risk, and capital financing. I'm actually born in Concordia, so we're celebrating my 33rd year at the university in this coming May.
Okay, I think you highlighted all of the important stuff. Okay, I'll pass it on to Marc.
Thank you. I'm Amr Addas. I teach sustainable investing at JMSB. I've been teaching an undergraduate course on sustainable investing there for over about a decade. And also I'm a strategic advisor to the sustainability ecosystem and to the dean, JMSB, on sustainability. And I manage a team of students that manages a fund in partnership with Money Life with a sustainable investing mandate, among other things.
Is that microphone?
Maybe I'll just test it. Is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was told I could cut myself by taking it out. I didn't. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. My name is Kevin Gould. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Geography, Planning, and Environment. And the title of my position, I'm a political ecologist. And what brings me here? I mean, I think the thing most important was I taught a class called Geographies of Justice back in 2018, and we did research to try to support the Divest Concordia group, and the end of that class was a kind of very interesting moment. Well, maybe I shouldn't talk about all of it now, but very interesting moment in which the university made a decision to divest, and I was, witness to that. So that's a real big part of why I'm here. And I've also worked with students a lot studying the university. A graduate class called University Worlds. We try to make sense of what the university is. So that's me.
Sure. I guess next. Hi everybody, my name is Erik Chevrier. I've been at Concordia for quite a long time as a student and also a professor. I've been teaching for about 12 years now at Concordia. I'm teaching an environmental economics course, and I actually see some of my students out, so thank you for coming, wonderful. I've actually been part of the Divest movement at Concordia since 2013, and instigated actually forming the JCAC committee, which is the Joint Responsible Investment Sustainability Committee, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from the acronym. And actually have been involved in this movement on campus for it's been close to 10 years now, so I'm very happy to be here, and thank you all very much.
Awesome, thank you all. So yeah, before we begin with Marc's presentation, that's going to give us a bit of an update on where the university is at. We just wanted to open the floor with a quick question, since everybody has quite a different background here at Concordia, but all have significant roots here, obviously. So we wanted to start off by asking what divestment means to you, and specifically what it means at Concordia. So I don't know who would like to start. Maybe we can begin with Marc.
Don't mind, I'll be prepared by presenting and explaining all that, so if you don't mind, I'll let you panelists.
Perfect. Do either Kevin or Erik?
Jumping in, sure. Okay. So I guess divestment is to eliminate certain kind of commodities or certain investments into other companies or kind of like commodity classes from the portfolio. I know the discussion around divestment has to do with fossil fuels quite often at Concordia, but you could actually look at that with different kind of commodity classes also. You could divest like from tobacco industries or divest from apartheid regimes or other things like that as well. So if we're looking specifically, if we actually have shares or actually managers of portfolios, a lot of the time the negative screening is used to make sure that certain commodities don't come into the investments. But it could also be about directly investing in companies or not. So divesting is not to invest or to actually eliminate those investments from the portfolio.
Okay, I think that's really helpful and comprehensive. I'm trying to think if I have things to add here. I guess one thing I wanted to add, that beyond the individual, the commodities, the individual things that are eliminated through a negative screen, there's also something very powerful with divestment to send a signal and a message that the university has made a decision to refuse to back away from some part of the economy. And I definitely think of divestment as both around oil and gas, around commodities that are related to human rights abuses, and then very much about Palestine, right? Boycott, divestment, sanctions, one of the most important divest movements that exists these days, and with its history in the South African divest movement. So, it's about these commodities, but it's also about politics.
Sure. So I guess to me, divestment, a couple of things I would say. Strict definition, it would be exiting positions based on some kind of screen, as my co-panelist said, based on sector, geography, economic activity, etc. From an investor perspective, divestment is a tool among many others that investors could wield as they develop sustainable investing strategies or other investing strategies. And in my experience, divestment is one of those tools that is not as sophisticated as some other approaches that can be used.
Well, thank you all. So now we can get right into Marc's presentation whenever you're ready there.
All right. Thank you.
do a different arrangement.
So I just want to make.
This one is
Okay. Okay. So I just want to make a couple of comments before I begin. I've been made aware of a sort of communication by the CEC, Committee, Client Emergency Committee, and very aggressive, very adversary. Have been, me and my team, been victim of very aggressive conduct against us in this topic. I just want to make sure that the university has a safe working environment. And everybody wants to talk about EDI. We all agree with EDI, but it's also we need to walk the talk about EDI. The other comment I would make about that communication is that it reeks lack of trust, as if that my department really tried to, at its best, to try to conduct something that to avoid what was committed for. And it's very disappointing because all we did, I have my director here, Abdel Chevrier with me, and all we've done in the last 5 years in the section of my team I'll show you, is just think and really start from scratch how we can be frontiers, pioneers into change into the whole sustainability market. So I hope the presentation today will provide some assurance to that. What I can say is this: there's zero doubt, and we are 100% aligned with the spirit, the intention of what was committed for, which is to address the warming of the planet and its issues. And that is zero doubt, is fully aligned to that. In fact, it's even greater than that. It's even attacking even more than that. Is the approach different? Yes. The approach is different, and this is what today I will be presenting to you about. So with this, I'm the one who's controlling this. Oh, it's still on. There we go. So first slide, it's really a set of Q&A I try to organize the presentation about. And this is about how the whole movement of sustainability is just not for the foundation. It's what we've done over all of our portfolios. So yes, for the investment side, the foundation, what we're working on. For the pension plan as well. We also, from our financing and capital side, our capital budget integrates the notion and criteria of allocation of sustainability. And most of you probably know that we were the first university to issue a sustainable bond. We were also the first university in Canada that made an agreement, a strategy with a bank called Sustainable Linked Loans, which is the ability for us to tie in our commitment towards sustainability as an organization towards KPIs. And if we meet them, we get a discount in our line of credit cost. If we don't, then we actually are penalized for it, which should be that way. And in this case, we've done what the first bank we will is BIBO, and it's tied into the foundation. Other ones that we're scaling up to will probably tie into diversity as well, KPIs. We're rated. We're monitored, university monitored by Moody's and DBRS, which are credit rating agencies for the financial health of the university over the long term. The issue of the ESG is part of their ratings, so I'm monitored for that aspect as well. We're rated from that perspective. Our office also oversees the whole ERM, Enterprise Risk Management Program at the university. We integrated the identify risk and opportunities related to ESG through our 5 objectives: financial sustainability, avoiding harm to the community and public trust, the resiliency of business continuity and productivity, and institutional agility, which is more forward-term, future-oriented. So this is cultural. Our resources, our retainment, our recruitment are aligned to that type of culture. And this is not something that is done on the side, but it's one that's bred and breed consciously for us, our office. Now, briefly, for what is a foundation, essentially it's an intergenerational fund. It's meant to make sure that the future of the university its wealth is protected, and we're not leaving the future generation, whether the student body, the staff, the faculty, the administrators, with a situation where everything, the resources is spent now, and we leave them in a hole and make sure that that capacity is there for the long term. Now, it has multiple investment programs. Most people think the foundation is only for endowments. There's more than that. We also have all of our sinking funds to repay the debt of the university from an investment perspective, and also from deficits from an operational perspective. We also have group insurance plan surpluses. So the university has group insurance plans. We have financial agreement. We own the surplus and deficit. We generate surplus, and the surplus is managed there. So it's multiple purpose. That's what I mean about multiple investment program. It also has multiple investment pool because some programs are meant to be more long-term, some are more short and more medium-term, and you'll see that how the two combines later on. It's also a separate entity. That's why we call it the investment arm of the university outside of pension, because pension in Quebec has a massive legislation context, and then we have to follow that, its own separate entity. But this time, for the university investment need, it's a separate entity called the foundation, and its own governance board, and its own, that must apply to fiduciary obligations, just like any board of any entity. In this case, related to investments. Okay, so what is the 100%, 0%, 10% commitment that the university made back in 2019? So, the challenge there for us when the commitment came, because we already were applying ESG in a risk management perspective, we already had a sleeve or a fund into impact investment. Now it's shifting over and said, okay, we're going to be 100% sustainable. So what does that mean? How do you put together an investment structure where it's 100% sustainable? So we had to rethink portfolio construction in a 100% sustainable context. And essentially what we did, and you'll see, is we separated the notion of capital allocation, which addresses one aspect, and then we separated the notion of optimization of risk and return in this asset class, and then we seek to marry it together. So for the 100%, how we said we're going about it is that, okay, we're going to expand the definition of impact investment for intentionality. So all capital must be allocated for purpose and intentionality, and I'll go over at a slide later on as how we go about doing that. The zero, we're defining the contribution towards net zero, which I know it can be defined in many ways. Well, actually, but the issue is how can we measure it to be accurate. And then the 10% is what we call mission-related investment, and what we're repurposing that for is really a sleeve or where we can contribute towards Concordia's own ecosystem. And I'll give an example later on how that will be applied, or can be applied anyway. But the idea, the message here is that if we do our job well in allocating capital for purpose and intentionality, by default, the 0% and the 10% will be met. That's the basis, the structure behind the 100%, 0%, and 10%. Now, to answer the question, so how do we go about allocating for purpose and intentionality? So we try to integrate it in a way that is all integrative. That's why I mean that although we've been focusing, we've had a lot of discussion about the global warming, it's actually a bigger picture we seek to try to address. So overall, yes, there's the planet. In the middle is a just transition of the people, but in the middle, in the guts of all, it's all what really underneath is seeking to have a sustainable economy driving it. So if there's one slide I want you to try to figure out and understand, is this slide. This is how we go about allocating capital. So I mentioned you have the planet, the people, and sustainable economy. We put allocation range. Why is the people side lower? Because capacity. There's not many strategies right now addressing solely or focusedly on the people side. It's mostly often a byproduct of it. So from an allocation perspective, that's why we started. And I should mention, one thing I want to mention. A policy, and especially a framework, is never in one time and then you leave it alone and we don't look at it and that's it. To give you an example of the pension plan, it's been we completely redesigned it and been massively successful since 2013, but every year we tweak it, we adjust to it, we evolve to it. This is a framework that's meant to be evolved, to completely be dynamic and evolve towards it. But this is our starting base of planet, 30% people allocation. And then, so not, what does it mean about allocating towards planet? Well, we try to address the we identify 9 pillars. For the planet, decarbonization, the biodiversity and the circular economy. For the people side, equity, health, and quality of life. And for the sustainable economy, it's about the good actors, promoting the good actors. Sustainable technology, because we're more and more becoming a technology-driven economy. And then the resources is industry resources, and including, not limited to, supply chain. These are themes. They're meant to orient us. They can adjust, they can add, they can be, but they're meant to orient us more, define more, especially, help us when we see opportunities and sourcing opportunities. And then what we do, we assign UN SDG goals to it. And what the purpose of this is, we're going to talk about that later on, is we want to address, how do we go about reporting it, right? That's probably one of the questions that people ask is, how will you really know that you're truly doing this? So the idea is to develop this 3-dimensional reporting about intentionality, which is how we will be able to define that. And I'll speak to it about what measures later on will be. And then you have the risk return aspect we can actually associate to all of it, but on its own as well. And then the integration with our community. What that means, we mean active engagement, internships, and other type of collaborative initiatives that we already have started and we can expand on. So I mentioned there's 2 marriage, the marriage of the capital allocation and the marriage of the investment program, which is what the board is really focusing on in terms of fiduciary obligations. So you get the planet, this is how we align ourselves in terms of allocation. You saw the planet, people, and circular economy allocation. We do it the same thing with our equities, fixed income, and alternative allocation. LTP is long-term pool, MTP is midterm pool. That's why you got different ranges. At the end, we merged it from a global perspective to make sure we're in compliance in both. How about from a return expected target? So we align this way, the planet are greater than equal to 6%, equity, same thing, people aligned to fixed income, sustainable economy aligned to alternative. This is our way to make sure that we reach the target that we have set out for the investment pool, which is 6.25% for the long-term pool and 4% for the mid-term pool. The idea here is that what we look for is complementary allocations in all aspects, not only from the diversification from the investments, but as well from the capital allocation side, not only from our classes here of planet, people, sustainable economy, but as well from a UN SDG. We want to make sure we balance, because the greater the balance, the greater the impact, and as well, and that's been my experience, the greater the diversification. So you meet both wins on a risk-return perspective as well. So this is the investment side. This is the same, that we go in detail there. I won't go much to it, but this is how, from an equity, fixed income, and alternative, we merge the public and private side in each. We give ranges, targets for long-term pool, and then after that, we merge it all. This is based on an optimization of risk return. We want to make sure that we're trying to reach those targets at the least amount of risk possible, because there's nothing worse in the investment context than drawdowns and losing capital, because to make it up is extremely painful and long. In the meantime, the obligation, don't weigh up the obligation, the liabilities, whether it's from a debt perspective or from a payout perspective, those don't go draw down. They keep compounding all the time. So investment, you would want to compound the money all the time. So this is what you've seen. I'm sure you're all very aware. Where there's a COP10, the COP27, 10 recommendations. We want to talk about where we are now with respect to specifically the oil and gas sector. So how it was defined in 2019 at the Senate was our exposure to the underground 200. And so in the concept of alignment of phasing out fossil fuel and scale up renewable energy, currently as we stand now, 1.5% of the overall foundation is exposed to the underground 200. It's been down from the 5% originally from when we measured it back in 2018. Half of that, by the time we do transition, will be eliminated. The other half of that are currently positions that cannot be liquidated, will be liquidated. And at this stage, what we have is we have one company of the 200 deemed by our portfolio manager that it has active engagement in ESG, along with our rating system, that so far, at this stage, they are definitely aligned to be part of the solution of transitioning, phasing out, and fully scaling out to energy. That's why, at this stage, monitoring-wise, we believe the exposure remain there because the opportunity remain there from an investment perspective. It's aligned to the transition process. Will it still be there? If it's still there, if they don't wrap up, but then it's no longer as part of our criteria as to maintain it. So how do we approach the different process? So how do we go about ensuring that the capital is allocated for purpose and intentionality? There's three criteria: conviction. So when we look at opportunities, when we're sourcing to allocate the capital, we look for conviction. What is conviction? Breadth and depth of the intention. Essentially, it can all be really defined as the measurement they'll be put forth. In other words, when they come for us and we look at the opportunities, if they cannot measure it, then obviously the breadth and depth is not there. So they have to be measurable. And this is how the 3D reporting will be coming about. There's a combination of all of these measurable intention and purpose that will come forth as telling the stories of how Concordia Foundation is allocating its capital. Influence, the level of engagement of the actual allocator. And it could come from two different perspectives. It can come from a local presence, and I'll give you an example. There's a fund that we're looking at. It is a social infrastructure fund in Europe that is retaking all infrastructure and repurposing for community needs. In this case, the fund itself has great influence as to how, not only how the infrastructure should be repurposed, but all of the surrounding environment into ensuring that it gets done, including the whole legislative environment and regulatory. The other way is also if they have the influence as to the portfolio manager. So sometimes an allocator is a manager of managers. So how much influence they're ensuring to make sure that the manager is doing the same thing that we talk about. So the level of influence is great. If it's something purely allocator based on passive monitoring, and it doesn't cut the actual criteria. And finally, what we always ask when looking at sourcing is opportunity to integrate with our community. And we've done this already with respect to active engagement and to see if any of the community will be participating in the active engagement that we're already doing with the portfolio managers and their positions. And also internships. We have done a lot of internships, integrated a lot of internships of Concordia students into any investments that we've done so far, and that's the objective. We always ask that question. And then any other collaborative initiative that we can do to move forward the whole advancement and awareness. So this is the infrastructure underneath. You get the due diligence process. We rate our managers based on the TCFD criteria, which is a measurement of us, but it's a lot more accurate in terms of assessing if they're really aligned to all of our what we want to do. We got the engagement process in place. We got the collaborative. We got to build the proxy voting policy. There's a tactical asset interesting here is how do we want to rebalance, incorporating the notion of incentives for those who are really performing from an intention perspective. And then what I want to focus on especially is the measurement and reporting. We'll be measuring from the global perspective, the whole portfolio, the strategic side, the portfolio managers, and as well relative to the market. The market is really from the fiduciary perspective, because the board wants to know if we would have done this, what will be the added or the decreasing value relative to it. So it's a good governance practice to make sure that that there's no opportunity cost as well from that perspective. So yes, we want intentions to do a lot more frequency in reporting update, and that is our intention. The challenge is the platform to do so, but we'll figure it out. But I think what you really want to know is, in the middle part, is how we go about reporting. And I go back to our three-dimensional reporting about, you got the UN SDG, which is all associated to our 9 subclasses. So we'll be able to report on and as you know, all of the portfolio managers must have measurements in the first place in order for them to get the capital. So we'll be able to consolidate all this into that perspective. We get the risk and return, which is always the case anyway. And then we're reporting also of all the extracurricular activities that we do, which is the engagement side, which is the internships, which is collaboration, which provides an even greater completeness as to the loop and the intentions to move forward. So the transition plan, because the commitment is by 2025. At this stage, we identified at least a third of our assets to be turned over. To me, from a true spirit of conviction, at least half of it will eventually be turned over, but there's a capacity issue to do so, especially in light of the market is still relatively in infancy with respect to intentional type of allocation. Sequencing, we already started. We recently allocated a strategy with ManuV, which is public equities fully aligned to those who are fully committed to the Paris Accord Agreement. And what's cool about that strategy and allocation is that it's aligned to the student program at the university, to which students are part of the back office analytic part. So there's a connecting activity here where we're putting the money where our mouth is. We also allocated recently a local fund to tackle the blue economy and to specifically the water preservation and efficiency with respect to technology. And that was recently done. We're going to tackle soon the absolute return, because that's the hardest part of our portfolio construction, is that this absolute return where you want to be offense and defense, but how do you integrate that in a sustainable ESG context? The market is very much in infancy, but we need to address that. It's part of the portfolio construction, so we'll begin with that. And then we're still working on that, but then we're probably going to move to the private market side, where we likely need our needs to marry both the intention and the capital and the asset class. Likely most of it on planet side that will be addressed, but we're still working on our transition plan. Timing, obviously, we got this year and next year. We are at the mercy of the pace to which the market is providing innovation towards purpose and intentionality. So to me, the important is the progress and its path, not necessarily the time. But having said that, we're going to certainly work our best to have everything in place by 2025. I wanted to give you some examples of what that means, some strategies of what that means about capital with intentionality and purpose. So you got the equities, fixed income and alternative, the asset classes, you got your sustainable classes. So blue impact, I just mentioned, it's about the blue economy. I mentioned about the Paris Accord Agreement for public equities. Morgan Stanley is, this is just, by the way, this is just a sample of opportunities. That means we won't allocate this. We have to do a due diligence process looking at it. But I just want to give you a feel of what that means when I say we're going to allocate towards 100% towards purpose and intentionality. Morgan Stanley, Economic Impact Private Equity. What's interesting about is the carry fees. The alignment of the carry fees with the obligation of the underlying position to decarbonate and to decrease their exposure to carbon fossil fuels. So there's alignment of interest there. That's very interesting. If we continue on equity side, we got a local fund specifically addressing life sciences, so the health part of the we talked about of our global intention. We also have an interesting one that with respect to mental health. All new companies really start up to address innovation towards mental health. It's called Noetic. It's from Toronto. Priority T, carbon credit financing. Interesting. What they do is they help finance strategies that will produce, that will decarbonize, and then instead of getting paid through interest rate financing, you get paid through credits, and then the credit is being traded in the regulated market. So that's the idea of the strategy. So it's aggregates, it's mortgages, but mortgages specifically to addressing community and specifically addressing generational transfer to make sure that one of the issues in farming is that the family loses they cannot afford it to maintain the farm anymore. So this mortgages and the strategy is meant to to keep that transfer within the same community or family. Pay zero financing. We often talk about venture capital as equity, but there's a nice strategy here on energy and agriculture, but specifically instead of trying to put money into dilute the company, it's a way to do some financing, which is rare financing in VC. So it's a different, for our investment perspective, different twist, different strategy, but essentially the main purpose. Alpha Fix and Real Asset came from the ESG Championship event, which I'll talk about later. E-Trust, Marine Infrastructure. This is vessels. There's a massive movement into decarbonized vessel, and this strategy is essentially to address that aspect of really decarbonizing and reinvesting into carbon-free vessels technology. Storage, which is for infrastructure. You got the social fund I talked about. Windmill community bond is very interesting. This is fun. This is to address Latin immigrant and to help the means, financial means to get them started into a new country. So it's specifically for immigrants. You got these long equity, and I want to finish with the D3 Innovation Fund. We talk about mission-related investment, the ability to scarve some of the capital of the foundation into the ecosystem of Concordia. You know about District 3. They want to really put a fund together to incentivize and then really capitalize some of the ingenuity that we have done by our own students. And Concordia will participate as an equity investor in there. So that's the one example. We're not there yet, but that's one example of where Concordia can participate into the ecosystem of its own student body and in the university. I'll try to be brief here. Research initiative, I talked about our impact. I'll a bit more detail, the internships. We participated in ESG Championship, which is a way to promote best of breed managers in ESG. We were the only institutional investor in there. And this is where we selected the Manulife equity Paris Accord agreement we talked about and the internships that came with it. Some of the engagement looking forward to evolve is to, we already have the engagement process. We're part of a larger pool of engagement through SHARE with about 25, 26, 28 Canadian universities to pool our efforts in terms of engagement. And it's mostly for Canada and US there companies, and how the JCI can participate with our team into the engagement process. I talked about the student linked loan. We're part of also the Cambridge Charter with about 16 other universities about strategy and smooth transition into low carbon. And when I go back to this perceived lack of trust, I don't know how many presentations we have done North America wide, virtual and in person, about promoting Concordia, promoting what our intentions are, being challenged against it, and we haven't been shy. We've been out there. We've been front and center. You can Google it and you can see it. We've been massively present into North America, into addressing what we want to do in our intention. And I'm finally going to close up is to just show you, this is a different measure about looking at the three-dimensional, how it ends up right now in terms of spreads within East NAG and trying to diversify. It doesn't include the Blue Impact Fund yet that we talked about, and the as well as the Paris Accord. But briefly, again, some of the really, I would say, high conviction type of intentional allocation we've done. Energies, local, VC, off-grider, food waste, which is still good, and you're going to hear about still good if you haven't heard about it. It's a recycling of food that is really taking place. We were the first institutional investor in there. We get more of the wind power renovation. Cycle capital is clean tech. Bright investment is cool. It's providing funds for exceptional students who don't have the need to go to university. The region is Africa right now. So we're providing funds to them, for them to get access to university, which otherwise will not, eventually to scale it up. NKB is a local fund about addressing transportation, decarbonization, land aggregation, neutrality, and URAPI. This is about biodiversity and about dealing with a co-op of farmers. Right now it's more in Latin America, but it's dealing about rethinking farming in a context that you can really, instead of dispensing and increasing fossil fuel, they actually are becoming credits to it. And there's a whole massive education. And what's cool about it, UNLP is actually a local, it's called Ecoteria. It's a local Sherbrooke fund, Sherbrooke firm that we invested in there directly. Learn Capital is about technology-driven investment in education context. It's a leading firm for tech education technology. And then BlackRock, I know it's controversial, but BlackRock is an impact fund. It's an impact fund. It's a proxy of liquidity. Once these are called, the capital are called, the impact fund is very intuitive and interesting. It takes AI and it takes the dollar with AI and insurance that other criteria of sustainability based on the AI technology they receive, that these firms are best of breed. So this is it. I'm not sure if I took too much of your time, but I want to make sure that at least for the conversation, you understand what we're doing, where we're going, and then we'll let the conversation begin.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marc, for that presentation. Obviously, this is a pretty multifaceted topic.
I'll use, I guess. You can hold it.
So definitely, it's helpful to have a succinct understanding of what we're really talking about here. So I think because we're running a little bit short on time, I'm going to try to keep just the questions I'm going to ask pretty short and the responses hopefully fairly short, just so we can get to audience questions, because I think that we really want to focus on those. But I will just start off by asking a question to the panel, and I guess somebody maybe other than Marc can start so that he can have a bit of a break. But how do you think that students and faculty have impacted the direction of the university's transition to sustainable investments? So maybe I'll ask Erik if you're okay to begin.
Sure. I can just talk unless you, okay. Thank you. So I guess a lot of the initiatives that have come out through discussions have actually involved students and faculty. In 2013, actually, when I had been working on actually divest movements with some people that are even here, we actually really did look at Concordia as to make actually a proper example of about where they're putting their money, what they're actually influencing is like the direction of what's coming into the world. We actually put a lot of pressure on the university in 2013, and then formed what we call the JCAC committee, so the Joint Responsible Investment Committee. Myself and a bunch of other people from Concordia have kind of led different initiatives. I've been more, I guess, kind of talking to Marc and Amr and other people on the JCAC committee, trying to actually discuss what it means to have sustainable investments. But I know other professors, Kevin, and there's a whole slew of other people that have actually worked with Concordia also to do the same thing. I think that largely a lot of the changes that Marc are describing have come actually from pressure of students, and I think students have actually been at the forefront of basically telling Concordia what they want to see coming out of investment portfolios. Which has kind of been difficult altogether because I see that there is, I guess, degrees of separation between what students want and what is possible even in the investment world. We're looking at basically market orientations to try to solve social justice issues. Sometimes those are not necessarily commensurable. All of that to say though, I guess to speak on what Marc is talking about, I do think that there is some credit to be given to Concordia because in 2013, the investment portfolios were in a very different place. There was no discussion actually about sustainability or social justice or anything like that. And I do think that they've come far away from that. I do think that there are shortcomings still, and this is stuff that we debate sometimes at the JCAC meetings as well. Some of these things I don't mind addressing. I don't think this is the time and place right now if I have to keep this short because I can probably talk about this for a while. But anyhow, so all of this to say, I think that largely faculty and students have made a big difference by putting pressure on the university to change the old habits that they had.
I'll go back to the thing I mentioned at the beginning with this class, Geographies of Justice. Just to talk a little bit about my experience there. First of all, it connects a lot with what you were saying. Like there was already this energy and mobilization that had been sort of going up and down over the years and exploring a lot of different angles to pressure the university. And so when there was a class where people could work on this, people were so ready to start and to get work done together, to organize, to pressure. Like strategies were, I don't know, I felt like they were already in the air. Like we didn't have to create things anywhere near from scratch. So there's this, all this work and thought and analysis that existed even just by that time. So that's an important thing to realize, and I think that thinking, right, and that analysis comes from that struggle of trying to push the university. Like that's an intellectual and at the same time political work, right? So that's an important piece of it. So that's also to say, I don't want to take so much credit. It was just a moment in which people got mobilized. There was another piece of it. I want to just tell a very short story. At the end of the class, we had a presentation at Senate, and a student named Ali Shara was the kind of lead person, but also Damon Matthews, the professor who works on climate change, was also presenting. And it was quite an extended thing, and the idea was to convince everyone that divestment had to happen. And the president at the time, Alan Shepard, was very forceful in saying there cannot be a vote, if I remember this correctly. There cannot be a vote, but there can be a presentation. And so that presentation happened, and then the idea was that the vote was going to come next time. And people were really convinced, it was obvious that if there was going to be a vote, which way it would go. And then the next meeting of the Senate, we were anticipating a vote, and in fact, I never knew different until after the meeting. But what happened is the university kind of got ahead of it and was like, we're going to do this. We're going to divest, but we want it to be an announcement. We want to, make this an announcement and sort of celebrate it at that meeting. I wasn't at the meeting, but that's what happened, because I know I was sending emails to the people on the Senate, please vote for this. And afterwards, somebody got back to me and was like, why did you send me that email? There wasn't a vote. I was like, oh, so I kind of pieced it together. But in retrospect, I guess I worry about that whole process in which there was no vote, right? How and why did that happen? How was that strategically, pushing against divestment? Or how was that a legitimate kind of collaborative thinking together process? I don't know. But that's the piece I wanted to share, because it's very much a story of faculty and students trying to pressure the university to make changes in
in the composition of the portfolio.
Yeah, thank you for that story. I do believe I was in the class with Kevin, and students were putting up their hands saying like, oh, hey, has anybody seen this announcement that just came out? And you were kind of like taken aback. So that was it's a good story. Yeah, do Amr or Marc, do either of you have any comments to
I
add?
can say something quickly, if that's okay. I think it's great that there was pressure from students. And of course, I remember in September 2019 that 500,000 people on the streets of Montreal, right? I think we all agree in this room that we all have a good and profound understanding of the dangers that climate change poses to all of us. Eco-anxiety is something that I think many of us, including myself, experience. But I really want to give credit to Marc and his team. I mean, what he presented is not what was asked, right? I understand that it's a symbolic act, and asking for divestment is something to coalesce around and to sort of feel like it's an achievement. But what they've gone way beyond that, right? And I really think it's important to give credit to the sophistication of the policy that they have developed, and to the amount of learning that has gone into understanding these issues, from Marc down to everyone on his team. And I know almost everyone on that team personally, and I can tell you they're all very passionate about what they're doing. So I would like to give them credit for what they've done.
Marc, did you want to speak to that?
Okay. So having been born here, I've been both a student and my career at Concordia. Community engagement is what, to me, Concordia is about. So I think it's outstanding that we have an engaged community, and I give full credit to both the staff and the students to be fully engaged in this and evolving the dossier. So full credit.
Awesome. I'm just going to ask one more question, and then we can move on to questions from the audience. So we've definitely talked a bit about how this has evolved from a push from students and from faculty. And there was already a lot of work done at the point when the university did commit. And that there has been a lot of changes, so I think people are trying to really wrap their head around what this is actually looking like today. So we'd like to hear from each of you what you think should be classified as a sustainable investment. What aspects, such as like carbon capture technology, carbon credits, natural gas, sustainable investments, all of these things, how are we defining what sustainable investments are and differentiating them from false solutions? I don't know if I want to pass that. Okay, yeah.
All right, so this is something that I talk about a lot in my classes, to define what is sustainable investing. I can give you the sort of broad definition, which comes from the World Economic Forum. Sustainable investment is an investment approach that factors material, E, S, and or G factors, environmental, social, and governance factors, into the investment decision, with the objective of maximizing risk-adjusted returns over time, because that is the fiduciary duty that any investor has to future generations and to their investment committee. And as to what, more specifically, what would qualify, what kind of investment, you mentioned carbon capture and so on. I think we can really get into a lot of details. Carbon offsets are a market that's plagued with all kinds of problems. But the reality is, I think we live in a world where negative carbon emissions are inevitable, that we have to remove carbon from the atmosphere in the next decade, 2-3 decades. It's inevitable that we have to do that. So I would define a sustainable investment as one that is aligned with a net zero by 2050 future, science aligned, aligned with the objectives of the Paris Agreement, which is to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. And I'm pretty confident this is what Concordia is striving to achieve.
Kevin or Erik?
Okay. So yeah, I guess I agree with some of what Amr is saying, but I think that sustainability has to be recognized also in the lens of social justice, and this is often left out of discussions about finance or discussions even about sustainability. A lot of time people use the triple bottom line, where I'm actually very happy that Marc actually talked about an event model of sustainability. I think we need to actually align our missions towards social justice and not just about environmental management. To be fair here, I don't think that there's 100% sustainable investment. I think that that would be very difficult to obtain, because even if we're looking at things that are helpful, let's just say, going towards solar energy, there are unsustainable practices within that. Also, social practices, just mining also is part of this. Looking at carbon capturing and sequestering also could have issues. If we're actually, let's just say we're buying forests and planting trees, this could also be looked at in kind of the lens of land grabbing as well. So there's a lot of negative things that could occur. I think the idea of sustainability needs to be better rooted in social justice and environmental justice. And it's very difficult because sometimes in finance these things are incommensurable. I think that we should be investing in clean drinking water for First Nations individuals, but if this is not going to amount to any kind of profit, I don't think that many financiers are going to embark on these things. So anyways, all of this to say is that it's quite complicated, and a lot of the notions of sustainability coming from geography departments are very different than coming from the finance departments, and I really wish these things were better understood between the two departments.
Thank you. Yeah, Kevin or Mark?
Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add one point. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's good. I mean, for example, you were just talking about the carbon offsets, and I was thinking that probably that is part of the financial strategy, carbon offsets. Sure. And yeah, I know I felt like I wanted to be in the audience to listen to your presentation, be able to see and hear better. But
We can send it to
in the field I'm in political ecology, no one, carbon offsets is seen as a disaster, I was looking at the recent literature, and there was a piece on the fantasy of carbon offsets. So it was given that carbon offsets are going nowhere, but they were really interested in how it is that practitioners come to put faith in them. What is that fantasy? How does that fantasy work? It's actually a kind of like a psychological analysis of how something that that's so proven that doesn't work, at least by some sectors, and that's the disciplinary world, right? You have people in different disciplines with really different imaginations of the world, but in my field, that's what it is. And so the question is how this continues to be believable and sort of satisfying to certain sectors, because it's so important to understand how something sort of keeps going, a kind of zombie life, right? Anyway, just a very small piece of this.
Briefly, to add, there's a difference between carbon offset and carbon credits. I just want to mention that the idea there, it was the credit side of things. The credit side of things help provide capital and help the pace of transition. And then the key here is about additionality and sustainability. In other words, are the additional credit, not just replacement, and it's sustainable for the long term. So I just want to that nuance. And I go back to my answers about that three-pillar planet, people, and sustainable economy. That's how I see sustainability.
Thank you all. So we're going to move to audience questions now. I know Mark touched on this earlier, but I do want to highlight that it is really important that everybody is respectful during this time. I know it's a topic a lot of people are passionate about. And for the sake of time, we do have a social event that's happening afterwards. It's going to be at Reggies, so if you have a lot of comments and you want to discuss, we will be doing that more. So please try to keep your questions to being questions instead of rather comments on the presentation that we're given. So the way we'll go about this is I'm going to move a mic to the center here so people can come up and ask their questions in the mic. But yeah, if everybody just raise their hand, I will select individuals, and then if you have a specific question for a specific individual, please direct it at that person when you're asking the question, just so that we can be clear with who is responding to things, but we'll also give an opportunity for everyone to respond to your question. So who would like to start us off? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Should I introduce myself first?
Please, yeah, introduce yourself.
Hi. So my name's Erin. I'm a Master's in Environment student here. I'll be nice, I promise. I guess I'm a bit hesitant to be optimistic about the language of scaling up renewable energy investments. I've done a lot of reading into recent literature about how if you scale up, it can actually just increase emissions. So I was just curious, and I think anyone can speak on this on the panel, about if Concordia has considered being a bit more intentional towards what clean energies they're investing in, because here it just says invest in clean energy, and I just wanted to hear if they're being considerate of which ones they're investing into, or if it's just broadly clean energy. Thank you. Can I sit now, or okay? Thank you.
Well, I can't speak on behalf of what the investment committee or what the Marc's office specifically is doing. But I think we have to remember that the objective is to decarbonize, right? And along the way, we live in the real world, right? There are real trade-offs that have to be made. And if you want to, factor in everything, sometimes, you're going to have to look at investing in. And again, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone here. This is just from my perspective, my experience. Expanding electric vehicles entails minerals that are mined sometimes in places that are controversial. And the process of extracting those minerals can also result in emissions that otherwise would not have taken place had the minerals stayed in the ground, right? But the alternative is, we stop moving and we damage our economy. We're nice, but the reality is we live in a world that can only sustain itself through mobility, partially at least, right? You can't just completely eliminate it. And so if we want to stop electric vehicles, we stop producing electricity, well, we're just going to live in the dark and we're going to not go anywhere, right? So I don't think that's very, very realistic. So if our objective is to reach net zero emissions, then we have to be a little bit realistic about where we are and how we can get there.
So thank you very much for that question, Erin. That's a really good point, because a lot of times we overlook certain factors that may actually seem really great. For example, sustainable intensification, the idea that basically if we make technology more efficient and it'll be more sustainable, that'll be better for the world. Well, what really happens is something called Jevons paradox, where basically you have a multiplier effect. It actually becomes cheaper for industry and it becomes multiplied. So we actually have more emissions because of that. Decoupling carbon is quite complex. Absolute decoupling is not seen to be possible. So the more efficient technologies sometimes lead to a worse future than we have. And these are difficult discussions to have, because it seems that when we have efficiency, it's going to amount to better scenarios, but that's not always the case, and a lot of the time it actually exacerbates the problem.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, by the way, and that's what I meant about the pace at which we can allocate a capital relative to the market at its infancy with respect to the innovation side. Having said this, recall we had three sub-pillars for addressing the planet. Yes, one is a decarb, but the other one is biodiversity, and the other one is circular economy. So that's, to answer your question, is the allocation of capital is not solely towards trying to address and put money into good or maybe risky type of that counterproductive, but also addressing other aspects that we need to address. And I'll give you an example about circular economy, but even broader. There'll be a movie this summer that'll come out, and essentially the movie will be about calling plastic the new secondhand smoke. So, as you know, that it took about 30 years for smoking to be the people change their behavior, and the reason why they change behavior is because when people started studies about secondhand smoke, in other words, it affected your health even though you don't smoke, oh boy, that changed behaviors. Plastic now, there's enough studies that is showing that it's affecting health in many perspectives. And so the movie is about trying to bring awareness and disruption into how we go about producing, consuming plastic. So to answer that in itself, I think is to me even more complex issue that we need to address is the notion of plastic, which to me, I'm looking right now to try to get some innovation around that, but there's very little, hence the pace.
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to ask for the next people that come and speak, just to make sure that you're close to the mic so everyone can hear your questions. So could I see? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Hello. Hello. Okay. My name is Edward Wong. My question is, with regards to the endowment fund, where did the money come from to start the endowment fund? And I don't know if you add new money every year, and if you do, where's that new money coming from?
Sure. So endowment fund is probably around 140 million now, and it's all donations. So it's all gift giving. And so the definition of endowments is that it's for, the capital is for perpetuity, and then the return, and set by the Canada Revenue Agency as a percentage, must go back to its intended purpose of giving. So we must have now over 600 different types of endowments over the years have been built up for the last 20-25 years. And most of the intention are towards bursaries and scholarship. Some of them are for research support, and some of them are for equipment, but most of it is, I would say the far majority for scholarship and bursary, to which the Financial Aid Office and Graduate Studies Office is responsible to allocating based on certain criteria. Have I answered your question?
Just to follow up, because at the beginning you mentioned, I don't know if you were talking about the endowment fund, but you were saying that it was to help to improve the pension and the group insurance for the administrator, I suppose. So I don't know if you're talking about a separate fund or...
Yeah, so the foundation, I labeled the foundation as the investment arm in universities for all of investment needs outside of pension. There's pension as a separate entity, and it's heavily legislated in Quebec. So what it represents, the foundation, other needs are endowments, all of our sinking fund to pay back all of our investment we've done in capital investments, and we also have a more shorter duration, the management of the group insurance plan for the employees at universities and their own insurance. But it's not pension, it's really group insurance.
You can go to the next question.
Hey everyone, thank you for the presentation. Just want to state, in 2019, Graham Carr stated that because of leading indicators of profitability, it made sense for the foundation to divest from fossil fuels. Is investing in fossil fuels in line with the fiduciary duty of the CUF according to today's leading factors of profitability?
This is the first I hear about the profitability angle there. I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. The intention of transforming the foundation from what was before ESG, risk management oriented with a sleeve on impact investment, to redefining it to be 100% intentionality, which is another way of defining impact, is 150% aligned with the intention of addressing global warming, but even at a greater scale, because global warming is much more than just oil and gas. So hence the notion of addressing it from a people, planet, and sustainable economy perspective. So we are 100% doing this, and that the approach may be different than what some people may have wanted to, but the intention is 150%. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, though.
Well, Graham Carr stated that it didn't make sense to keep investing in fossil fuels because the indicators of profit.
Then we're definitely not investing we're definitely not with intention of investing in fossil fuel. The idea is reversed. It's the intention is to address innovation, phasing out fossil fuel, ramping up a total alternative. Exactly what we want to do.
But are fossil fuel investments profitable according to your numbers right now?
Oh no, if that's the case, then my 0.5% will be much more than that. I'll be, if you general market right now, I'm probably about 10%. So if that was the case, and then if I believe in that, then I'll be probably around 10% with the measure the underground 200, which I just mentioned that we're about, but once we do the ramp up, likely to be less, probably half 1%, one position.
I think we have one more response.
Yeah, I just want to address this fossil fuel in a broad sense, I would urge everyone to read the IEA report, the International Energy Agency report, that came out about 2 years ago, outlining a pathway to net zero economy, global net zero economy by 2050. It's a very detailed report. It provides a very detailed pathway and process for actually achieving that. And one of the things that it says is there should not be any new investments in exploration of fossil fuels. Of course, that's not happening. But that report really outlines the process really well. And within that report, and I think it's really important for everyone to understand that, fossil fuels do not need to disappear tomorrow. If fossil fuels disappear tomorrow, then we're going to have a depression. We're all going to be standing on the street trying to eat, right? So I think it's important to be realistic that fossil fuels will shrink. That is a fact. But they're not going to disappear. They will play a far smaller role in the energy mix. But even within that scenario of net zero by 2050, there will still be a small role for fossil fuels. I think that's important for everyone to understand.
Yeah. So look, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not building the plan here, but my understanding of this so far is that there's not going to be a negative screening process for fossil fuels, which concerns me because equity funds look like they're up to about 40%. So there could be fossil fuels within those equity funds that are just part of the kind of computer algorithms that make investments based on return. Also, I think I want to push this a little bit further too. There are other commodities that I think we should actually do negative screening for also, like weapons manufacturing, like developing the tar sands. Like I could name a whole bunch of different things too. So I would love to see finance go towards actually where we're actually making decisions about the things that are coming into the world, and actually having negative screening for the things that we don't want there. And to me, this is not a far-fetched idea, and maybe won't be the best for returns, but I think is actually the way to go forward if we really want it to be truly sustainable.
Yeah, that was our next question.
Yeah, hi. I'll try to keep this short because I see that there's a very large line. I would like to respond to your comment, and then I'd also like to ask a question of Marc Gauthier. So your comment about the fact that fossil fuels they can't go away tomorrow. It's really fascinating to hear that, because back in the day, I think it was 2014, 2015, Justin Trudeau was here. I think he was campaigning, and Divest Concordia had asked the question, well, when are you going to get rid of oil? And it's oh, we can't do it tomorrow. So it's funny to hear that again. And we all know that immediately after that he ended up buying a very large, inexpensive pipeline. So anyway, I'm not going to conflate the two, but I'm just saying it's kind of interesting to go back in time that way. My question to you, Mr. Gauthier, well, first I'll start with thanking CTV, thanking the panel for being here. It's great to have this opportunity. I really appreciate the level of detail that you went into your strategy. I think it's quite good. It's really ambitious to be going after the SDGs. I wish that was something that they were talking about back in the day in 2018. My question to you, I don't have a finance background, but my question is more about these sustainable linked loans. So I did a little bit of Googling online, and I saw that pretty much all Canadian banks offer these sustainable linked loans, and I'm just wondering, what are your criteria for choosing the bank that you want to go with? Because I know there's banks like RBC, which are known for developing tar sands, for human rights abuses. I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's any consideration in how you're selecting the bank to be working with.
Yeah. No, then yes. Figure this out.
Yeah. So this is the sustainable link loan is part of our financing program at the university. So I have six banks that provide me liquidity: RBC, BMO, TD, Desjardins, CIBC, and National Bank. So the intention was, okay, how can then we align the partners we're with into an alignment of interests with respect to sustainability? So I approached each bank. BMO was the one that was, I guess, called more readiness to do so, especially at an institutional stage. I'm not familiar at the retail stage. I know institutional, I'm pretty much the first one. So essentially, I got 85 million. They provide me with a line of credit of 85 million, and I borrow against it. And Now, just as you know, that the rate has increased, so it's more expensive. What we agreed to is that, and this is tied to the foundation, if we meet our 100% sustainability goal and the path towards it is a path, then this is monitored by the audit, the financial audit, and then there'll be other types of third-party assessment. They will give it a discount in our line of credit, so it will cost us less. We're rewarded, so we're incentivized. And if we don't, then we'll actually going to bump up. So it's a once a year evaluation. They'll give us an extra cost or savings based on. So it's an incentive on both ends to move forward. Now I'm working with other banks and their pace as to which to do so, because as you know, once you do one, then they have to think about all their clients. So that's why it's a bit slower on their pace. But then probably what we'll do is we'll tie in the KPIs, not only to the foundation, but to the action plan of the university and their KPIs. So then the university as a whole, not only the foundation investment, the university as a whole and its intention would also be accountable and then rewarded or penalized for it. Have I answered your question?
Not really. It kind of, sorry. No, my question, like, thank you for explaining that, because I mean, I'm sure that like people in the audience like don't know what that is, but it was more, I was asking about how are you selecting the bank that you wish to engage in sustainable linked loans with? Like, what are part of the selection criteria before even engaging in a sustainable linked loan? Like, how do you screen against like the banks?
So I thought I answered it, but
yeah.
Essentially it's I got 6 banks I deal with. I get 6 banks that feeds me a line of credit, and I'm addressing that topic with each of them. So I'm not selecting, and I'm literally addressing that notion with each bank, which is the one I'm already partnered with, and already provides me liquidity on my line of credit. So it is no selection here. I'm really going after each of my partners to establish this sustainability loan with.
Okay.
Is that so? Now the question becomes, how do I go about selecting one for a bank for my line of credits?
Yeah.
Well, I try to bring every bank if I could, because the more credit I have, the more liquidity I have, the more safer the university is. So, so this is about liquidity, right? This is the liquidity of the university. In a Quebec context, we don't have cash. In university, yeah. Ontario University, otherwise have loads of cash because they're not subsidized mostly by. In Quebec, we're heavily subsidized. I don't have cash. I live by receivables. I live by line of credit. I don't have line of credit. The university can be in danger of not just being going concern. So I live by the liquidity. I try to have all banks provide liquidity, and then I work with them on a SSL.
Okay. I'll just very last comment. So just to finish, to summarize your point, like if a bank, let's say, is engaged in, let's say one of these 6 banks is engaged in human rights abuses and really heavily invest in fossil fuels, if they provide a sustainable investment fund or a sustainable linked loan, you would go with it.
So I just want to make, I think your perhaps definition. I'm not investing with them, right? They're providing me just liquidity. That 85 million is not linked to anything they do. They just give me access to 85 million, and then that access, all they do is charge me a fee. And I'm saying, let's align our interests here with sustainability. But I'm not investing with them anything. So this is purely they're giving me liquidity.
Yeah, I have my answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Can we hear from anybody else on the panel on this? Okay, our next question, please.
Hello. Per Strategy 16, by promising to partner with other institutions in order to work towards meeting Concordia's sustainable investing targets, how does Concordia ensure that the institutions it partners with share the values of its student body, aka us? For example, could you elaborate on Concordia's Memorandum of Understanding with Bar Island University for the sake of furthering research in fields such as renewable energy? Given that during Israel's 2014 war on Gaza, Israel shelled Gaza's only power plant, igniting 2 million liters of diesel fuel and the destruction of hundreds of thousands of crops. Wondering, given the renewable energy topic here, what Concordia has to say about that. Thanks.
It's more academic research.
Assuming that this is more in line with the investment practices, though, I think, right?
Sorry,
Could you just repeat the question, though?
Yeah, sure. So given that we're doing this topic is about renewable energy, and that per strategy 16, by promising to partner with other institutions on this to further research in renewable energy and environmentalism, and that this is Concordia's plan, how does that align with Concordia aligning with and supporting Bar Ilan University, given that Bar Ilan University, which is located in Israel, and Israel's 2014 war on Gaza, for example, shelled Gaza's only power plant, burned hundreds of thousands of crops and acres of land. Like, how does Concordia fit with this attack?
I'll comment on that. I appreciate the question, but I don't think we're the right people to ask. Marc is not involved in any such decisions on academic cooperation agreements with other universities. Neither are any of us as professors at Concordia. So
I guess that's even better than what do you as professors at Concordia think about this cooperation where it's about renewable energy with this university that does and invests and supports this massive systemic destruction of the environment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a professor, right? If it was my decision, we wouldn't do that. Okay?
Good to know.
We have students have been calling for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, right? For many years, those have passed at the university on multiple occasions, right? The university has an opportunity to respond to the students. So far, the university hasn't done so.
The university hasn't, and instead, is doing all of this about our plans for renewable energy and our plans for net zero waste and whatever carbon footprint in 2050, and we want to divest and we want to protect First Nations people, blah blah blah. And here we are, as of a few weeks ago, months ago even, partnering with Bar Ilan University and over renewable energy and research. So I'm just wondering what academics, professors, the admin think about this and how it makes sense exactly, because to me it doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem like.
It doesn't make sense.
Great.
So Kevin,
Yeah.
you said I'm not addressing that. I'm not addressing that.
Oh, I was speaking more about the university. I don't know how you're addressing it or not addressing it. I mean, I have no idea.
Seems like
Yeah.
not addressing it, maybe.
But I think, like, there's a boycott movement that has to do with Palestine. Like, there are companies that you could potentially target, but it hasn't even been too much of a discussion with you. I don't think.
I misinterpreted your answer.
Yeah.
My bad.
No, but the university itself has ignored these struggles.
Just to add to that, so yes, I'm very sorry to hear about these situations, but I think these circumstances show how difficult it is to define sustainability, because linking on with like renewable energy could actually have social consequences and all of these different things. So I think it just really shows the complex nature of how like sustainability functions and how we actually have to nuance these endeavors. And just to put kind of labels of like being 100% sustainable, I don't think is necessarily realistic. I think we have to look at the nuance and look at these different factors that play into the notions of sustainability that we're defining here.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Cool, yeah, thank you. I just want to start off by saying that I find it quite disheartening that this conversation between admin and faculty in universities being mediated in the presence of like security guards with bulletproof vests on. We were talking about at the beginning, the sort of hostile environment around this issue, and I don't see how that helps at all. That's just the first comment, but I have a question. I think it's great that there are so many people here, and I'd like to be really clear about this question because I think they all really deserve an answer to this question, and I think that a lot of them are here because of this question, and I could be mistaken about that, but and there was a long presentation at the beginning that I don't feel like actually addressed it. So in 2019, when Concordia made their announcement to divest by 2024, they received an enormous amount of positive press, and I would just like Mr. Gauthier, very straight up, a yes or no answer. Is Concordia University Foundation going to take all of its money out of the fossil fuel industry by 2024?
And how do you define the fossil fuel industry?
Oh my God! All companies that produce and contribute to technologies that help the production of fossil fuels. That's one definition. I don't feel like that should be up to me to figure out that definition, but there's one just off the bat.
So I'll repeat myself, and now the attention, we're 100% aligned. The approach may be different.
Yes or no? Will the university take all of its funds out of fossil fuels by 2024, like they promised to do in front of all the press in 2019, at the height of the climate justice movement, when there were calls all across the university, a ton of positive press? Will you by 2024 take money out of the fossil fuel industry?
So the answer, in the way it was defined at the Senate, was the position exposure to the underground 200. I just mentioned to you now we project to have one position to it. Will it still be there in 2025 or not? I'm not sure. If they're part of the solution going forward in the phasing out of fossil fuel and toward ramping up renewable energy, yes, there will be. If they're not, then there'll be zero.
So as I understand, there's no 100% promise that by 2024 the fossil fuels will be out of the portfolio of the Concordia University Foundation.
The way the approach is about being an investment approach, being part of the solution, excluding the bad actors who are not part of the solution. So it will be invested to those who are part of the solution. We will not be invested who are not part of the solution.
Great. So just quickly, if they are part of the solution, will you go back to the press and tell them, be transparent to the students, to tell them that you did not honor your promise to divest completely from the fossil fuel industry?
I'm not too sure what the purpose of this is. You seem to have a relationship to what was the credit given. I was given no credit to this, so this is I could speak to that. I think the purpose today was to show our attention. I hope what I provide you is the even greater way of addressing this, even more impactful, but even more impactful, and it's certainly leading edge. Nobody is doing that, so hopefully you got an appreciation of it, as opposed to trying to reconcile back to one single question that seems to be. There's a story here that could be told that is even bigger, even more leading edge, to represent what the university is doing, even more impactful, because the issues of global warming is more than just fossil fuel. And hopefully what I try to do is what this is what it's about.
I think the answer you're looking for is no and at best maybe, but thank you. Yeah.
Does anybody else on the panel want to respond to that question?
I think everyone here, oh sorry.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
I think everyone here wants real action on the ground, right? Wants real impact from investment decisions. And I think that's exactly what Concordia is doing, investing in companies that are aligned with what scientists, right? And I think we all respect scientists. What scientists have told us aligns with net zero future, right?
Scientists tell the truth, you know. Sorry.
Can you say that again?
Scientists, they have integrity and they tell the truth.
That's right.
Not like, so when you make promises, I think when John was focusing on that.
I think we mentioned earlier that we need to keep this respectful.
Sorry.
And not to make accusations as you just made. And that just tells me that all the presentation that Marc took the time to go through just kind of sailed through and didn't quite register, which is quite unfortunate because he took a lot of time and put a lot of effort into making his presentation. And people don't quite grasp that.
Integrity, though.
Not much we can do. And again, the unfortunate and disrespectful statements you just made are quite unacceptable.
I actually empathized with your comments. I can understand that. Like, I was there when the commitment was made. And it could be that what's being offered now is better. Maybe it is. But the commitment was made to do a certain thing. And so there's then a work of discussion and collaboration and finding consent with the person that you made, or the community, the audience that you made an agreement with. And sometimes when people feel that things aren't fair, or things have been, they're not being treated fairly, you can be emotional, you could be angry, it's normal. And I didn't hear any anger anyway. It's really just expressing a feeling of, that there's been a lack of integrity. Maybe there hasn't, right? Maybe there hasn't in some way. Maybe there's some discussion that we can figure this out. I don't know, but that's the concern. It does look like that. So I want to say that I hear you.
Can I just say something? Yeah. So I guess I've been working on this amongst other people here for like close to 10 years, and I can tell you the people in the room when this announcement was made. Like I was part of a JCAC committee meeting. They came in the room and basically told us, all right, we're actually going to divest from fossil fuels, and then actually the commitment is still on Concordia's webpage. If you actually look, the announcement is still there. So I think there's a lot of disappointment with people that have been talking about, because I don't really know the answers to all these questions either, because I'm not sure what Concordia's position is on a lot of these different realms. But when I'm learning kind of through the grapevines here that Concordia is not going to respect the divestment position, it's quite concerning to me, because I don't even think it goes far enough. Like, I think there's so many things that we could add to the negative screening portfolio that I thought this was just a starting point. And a lot of us believed, all right, we're making an impact here. And look, not to put down all of what they're doing, I do think that some of the things are in the right direction, but I think that when commitments are made, and especially like when we're looking at major issues, we've crossed the world planetary limitation on carbons that are supposed to be in the atmosphere. Same for phosphorus and nitrogen. We're also, at the loss of biodiversity that is part of a global kind of capacity that we can't actually handle. Why aren't these things being negatively screened also? So, I guess I understand why people are disappointed, and I really do hope Concordia does, go to their commitment and actually abide by it.
I just want to quickly interject and remind people, if you have comments, please do come stand at the mic, just to be respectful to everybody's time that is doing so. And both ends to try not to take these things too personally, because it is in fact a larger issue that affects a lot of people in a lot of ways. So yeah, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is David. I'm also a master's environment student, and I have a lot of questions, to be honest, a lot of comments to make too, but I trust that a lot of people behind me will address a lot of these issues, so I'm going to focus on one specific thing. You've presented a lot of information to us today, but it's really hard for us on the outset to know what's in these portfolios, what's in these investment vehicles. So I'm curious about the due diligence you're doing on these portfolios to look at what's in it. And also, we were talking about carbon offsets. There was a Guardian investigation for 9 months that was published recently, and they found that Vera, the largest carbon offset certifier in the world, about 90% of the rainforest carbon offsets they're putting out and selling are essentially worthless. So if the university is also investing in carbon offsets, how are you evaluating this and looking in detail into what's in all these things?
Would you want to describe a bit how we do due diligence?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Hi, everyone. We take a collaborative approach when doing due diligence. What I mean by that is we in a team, an investment team, will talk to the investment manager. Thank you. We'll talk to the investment manager and trying to understand the underlying in the portfolio, and from different perspectives, like whether it's carbon exposure, social impact, anything like that. We will also talk to our partners or institutional kind of colleagues, which also have different teams looking into those investments. So the due diligence we do will combine with the due diligence as well, and we team up as well with a consultant in that field to come up with an overall view of what that investment is and if it's fit with our investment objective and our sustainability objective. So it's kind of a multi collaborative approach, I would say, and involving many specialists in the field, as well as in the field of sustainability, but also investment. Basically trying to match what Marc Gauthier called the marriage between environment, social governance, and the investment side. So that's the due diligence. We try to be as diligent as possible and involve as much as possible knowledge within that process before coming to a decision, and that will go through the investment committee and the board as well, right? To make sure, and then on those committee you have other professionals as well, which will look into the recommendation and the findings, and will question, what we do, and we challenge what we do, and that's how the decision is taken, basically.
That is a very quick follow-up question. So, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I appreciate the portfolios are very complex, but do you get the opportunity to look at the individual investments that are inside each portfolio?
Yes, we do. So when we look at we don't only look at the current investment, we will look at the history at the, on the investment manager side. So we'll look at different portfolios, the past fund that he actually offered to investors, and see how he managed those funds, and what was the outcome, and was it successful from an investment perspective? The target, the sustainability target, were they met or not? And what's the process around that before actually focusing on, the current position and what he intends to do, basically. So we do look at those individual positions, and that's how we come up also with, when we say we have 0.5% in carbon underground 200, we do apply this kind of filter as well to see, what the exposure of those funds are in, the thing we don't want to own, basically. So that's how we do go to that detail of information. Thank you.
Sorry, we only have less than 20 minutes left, so everybody, if you could just stick to one quick question, and we'll try to do the same for the answers.
Can you hear me? You champion BlackRock as an impact investment solution, addressing all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Yet, as of 2022, BlackRock still holds $260 billion in fossil fuels and $85 billion in coal alone, despite pledging to sell fossil fuel shares. Can you be sure that Concordia funds, are you sure that Concordia manages their funds addressing, quote, the world's greatest social and environmental problems?
So the strategy of BlackRock is an impact one that uses artificial intelligence to filter around the best of breed companies with respect to many attributes. It doesn't reflect the BlackRock firm and whatever other fund that they do. It's really a unique liquid strategy that is intention, is impact, which covers well what we wanted to at impact sleeve. And so that's why we approached BlackRock, because he had these very few of them have this liquid impact investment, very few, and that's why we invested.
Can I ask a follow-up? Do you really think this is in line with Concordia's mission? You're putting money into a company that funds fossil fuels. You're indirectly funding fossil fuels.
Sorry, is there a response?
Yes. So then this applies to every portfolio manager then?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, exactly.
So if all portfolio managers and all of everything was 100% sustainable, then we wouldn't have discussion. The market and the industry is not there, not even close. Then how do we handle the transition towards that?
By divesting.
Yeah, divesting is not the solution to this, trust me. And if students want to continue to get their bursaries and their scholarships, then the university needs to be able to invest money. And if we're going to tag every asset manager with an evil label, then we're not going to have anyone that will take our money to invest. And BlackRock is the largest asset manager on the planet. The fund that Marc is referring to has nothing to do with their passive investments that you're referring to, which are plain vanilla funds that simply track the index without any active decision by BlackRock. The impact investment fund that Concordia is investing in has nothing to do with that capital, so there's no movement from there to those funds.
I mean, just responding to that, I think what students want is to be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water and
be able to, for instance, give clean water to all of the First Nations in Canada. Like, minimizing what we want down to getting our bursaries and scholarships is like a complete, like, disrespectful move of like what the students here want. And I think that's like very out of line.
As Mark said, there's no asset manager that does not have some kind of controversy.
Yeah, and my next question actually goes right along that. Just continuing off investing into BlackRock, considering that they have billions of dollars in fossil fuels and billions of dollars in weapons investments, do we right now, does Concordia have negative screens for investments into weapons manufacturing and fossil fuel companies with the money that we have in BlackRock?
In BlackRock, well, by default, that's what it doesn't, yeah. The strategy itself doesn't address, it excludes those strategies, and much more. It's an impact fund excluding those strategies. Now, if you talk about the portfolio manager, I can't speak all the strategies, but this strategy is exactly that. It is integrating many aspects of sustainability, and it will be excluding those type of
So, weapons manufacturing and fossil fuel industry is negatively screened from our investments in BlackRock.
I wouldn't use the word negatively screen. I believe it's couldn't speak to the strategy. How about it? It's a quantitative strategy using artificial intelligence into many criterias in sustainability. That's what it does. So we can certainly come back with a more detail. I couldn't tell you the detail of it, honestly, but we can certainly come back and provide more detail as to what it does.
That would be great. I mean, I think all of us want more details in general on this slide, because what I see are a lot of buzzwords with not a lot of substance or substantial definition to what these mean. So that is disappointing. I think that what the intention, as you've been saying a lot, is great, but the substance and the actual action feels very lacking.
Well, if I'm given 3 hours, I could give you that, but I was not given 3 hours.
I completely
And
understand.
BlackRock, I just want to repeat, it's not a strategic allocation. It's a proxy just for liquidity purposes. There's a difference.
As someone who is not an economy student, I would love more transparency on what our BlackRock portfolio looks like.
Do either anybody else on the panel?
Hi, I just want to address that the comment about the Climate Emergency Committee and the email that was sent out as a member of the Climate Emergency Committee. Mark, if you could.
I'm not leaving except that I have to go teach a class and poison some young minds. So I'm just, as an investment professor, sustainable investing professor, I'm happy to dedicate some time to anyone who would like to understand more about investments and the nature of different investment vehicles from a giant like BlackRock that has hundreds and hundreds of separate investment vehicles. Maybe I can coordinate with the CSU if you'd like. I'll give an hour free seminar on some basics of investing.
Teaching is a two-way street, don't forget.
Did you want to re-ask your question?
Yeah, so just to address the comment about the email sent out by the Climate Emergency Committee, as a member of the Climate Emergency Committee, when you first said that, I was like, oh, maybe that's true, but after this presentation, it seems the title of the email was Concordia is not divesting, and that seems to be accurate, and that we're still invested in fossil fuels, which, as you said, is 1.5%, and I commend you for having reduced that from 5.7. But my question is, given that's only a few $1 million, what is the resistance to divesting more clearly without depending on the companies becoming more sustainable or moving to a greener future or whatever? What is the resistance there in putting Concordia's reputation as being a leader in sustainability just for that few $1 million that are still invested in those underground investment funds?
So there's a fiduciary aspect to institutional investment when you're managing not your money, you're managing institutional money, public funds. So the approach here is from an investment perspective, and in this case here, the one position that we're talking about that everybody seems to be, you guys are completely saying I'm not doing anything and we're going against this. We talk about one position now. It's in line with the COP27 recommendation of phasing out fossil fuel and ramping up the renewable side of things. If companies are part of the solution in ramping up, phasing out and ramping up, and if they're part of the solution and they're materially scaling up part of the solution, then from an investment perspective, it is a valid investment to make in line with the values we approach. That's why, because right now it's seen that this will be part of the solution from phasing out to ramping up, and if it does so, then from an investment perspective, it also be rewarded. If it doesn't do that, then from an investment perspective, it won't be rewarded, and hence the exclusion from the alignment in between. Hope I answered this question.
So if they don't commit to whatever changes that they're going to make within their companies by 2020,
they will liquidate.
By 2025, they will no longer be part of the investment portfolio.
Well, this monitoring is done on a bi-monthly basis. So if they're no longer, by then we're reviewing that they're not committing themselves to the plan and the path that they have addressed it to. They're not part of the solution. Absolutely, then they won't be part of it.
Okay. So in 2025, we will be completely divested if these companies. Wait, because in the press release in 2019, that was what was
If
said.
you want to play that part of the press release, that's you, okay?
But
what I'm showing is I'm trying
it's a
to
statement
show.
made by Concordia for the
I'm
reputation
trying.
of all
What
of
I'm trying to do is show a progression and a path to exactly providing the same intention. That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so Concordia is not divesting by 2025. Right.
You already asked that. This is the same question I already done before.
Yeah, but you didn't ask.
Okay. For sake of
I'm answering. I'm answering it.
For sake
Yeah,
of time,
I don't think you like the answer. That's why.
Well, because that's not what was promised. What was promised was divestment. I don't want to take away from your
Yeah, for sake of time, I think we're going to stick to doing just 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up because we've only got 5 more minutes left. But is there anything either of you want to add to that?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, so I think this question's popped up a few different times about the idea of transparency. That's strategy 17 of the Sustainability Action Plan, and I think it's a really important one. I've been at Concordia since 2017. I was heavily involved with the divestment movement in 2019. I remember, like many people here, when this announcement was made, and then we had a global pandemic, and then things fell off the face of the earth, and we haven't had a lot of communication from the university on where we're at with this. I was at the JCAC meeting in November when we got this update, and it was very similar to this presentation where you did have 3 hours in that case, and I came out of it not feeling like I knew anything more than I did when I went in. So for me, it's really important to ask this question on how will you uphold your commitment to full and open transparency and communication as stated as part of Strategy 17? And in what ways will this information be communicated to students, and how frequently? Because we're getting dangerously close to the end of that time period, and we've had very little communication.
So at the meeting, we addressed that we had to take the time, that it was an hour, a year and a half to develop this and have a discussion which first got to be held with the fiduciary board of the foundation. The intention, and I addressed it there in the presentation, is to increase the frequency of reporting, its progress, and the way to address that transparency is I mentioned about a three-dimensional reporting about the intention, which is the measurements that will come from the allocations, then with the risk, and then with the integration. So this is how the best way, because we will seek to measure the carbon footprint on the fund like everybody else, but we'll seek to do that. But I think you're all aware that right now the standard, the accuracy and completeness of those measurements are very limited. It's a lot of proxies, it's a lot of estimates and only estimates. So whoever is measuring this, whoever fund it is, if you take it forward. But what we can actually really measure is specifically what the capital is doing, its intention, and then reporting that absolutely on the frequency that the portfolio managers provide us. So the intention is to be more frequent. If it's every quarter, great, we'll do that every quarter. We have to ramp up our structure to do that, but that's the intention to do so. And then also seek to measure the global footprint, the carbon footprint, everything. We will do that, but the market is simply not there yet in terms of accuracy and completeness.
Yes, I understand where you're coming from, and respectfully, I'd like to say that, if you hadn't been invited here by the CSU, would this information have been communicated to the student body in an open platform? Would students have had the opportunity to ask these questions? Like, the onus needs to be on the administration to take those steps to allow students this opportunity. That is part of transparency, and you've made a commitment to it. There's many different ways that you could do that, but I really do think the responsibility lies in your hands.
Okay, I am back. So, you have a very mobilized base of students before you. I mean, this is at 4 p.m., 5 p.m. on a Thursday, and we are all here because we care where this money is going. So how do we as students, if we do not agree with this investment portfolio, change this investment portfolio?
What I would like is, all I heard today was the word divestment, divestment, divestment. I haven't heard one comment about what you think about this and its bigger picture, and if you understand it, and if not, why not? Why is it not this in the same spirit and intention, and it can accomplish the same way, but even bigger? This is why I don't understand why not. This is why I don't understand. Outside, I've seen a lot of politicalness, but I haven't seen any why this is, and even from your answers, you said that I'm not addressing it. I don't understand why I'm not addressing it. So I need, this is what I would like to have is, what do you feel? Because we believe that we're addressing even more impactful the climate issue, even more integrated, just transition, everything. Nobody else is doing that way. We're proud of it, but yet today I haven't heard one single comment as to why this is wrong, as opposed to your 2019, 2019, 2019. This is why I would like to know. Why is it? What is it? Even though I'm down to one position, but that's not.
All right.
That's not it. That's why.
Respond to this. Yes, it's because when we look at this and when we listen to you speak, we hear the word intentionality, but we see and hear very little about the actual actions that you're doing. We see you investing in clean tech investments. We want to know what that looks like. Who is defining clean tech? Do you have students and professors from the geography department, from the environmental department, or are they all coming from JMSB? How are these decisions being made? Who is part of these decisions? Because we are obviously not happy with this.
So, I mentioned there's a third of the assets we turn over. We have yet to do it. So the idea is to then provide that level of detail.
Yes, we would like that level of detail.
But we're not there yet.
So can you make a commitment to when you have that level of detail?
I made that commitment.
That we can see with high transparency where Concordia's money is going.
But
when you invest in clean tech, when you invest in BlackRock, when you invest in
But this is where I don't
capital.
understand how come you're not capturing that. The whole presentation, the level of detail is about transparency, where we're going with that. And for you to tell me that
we're not going to do that? I don't get it. This is exactly our intention to do so. I don't understand why you're saying you're not going to do it.
Because you, in 2019, to bring it back to this thing, you said you were going to do something, and now we don't see it. On a very basic level, we don't see it.
And this is where I don't understand why you don't see it. This is where I understand why you don't see it.
I'd like to pass this off to the other panelists to give answers, and then we'll get one final question from you.
Great, thank you. And also, like, thank you. We see that you are, like, trying. And we want you to try harder.
So I guess I just wanted to address this too, because Mark, you keep on pointing to us, telling us that we're telling you that I don't know, that you're not doing like things properly. Look, I've given you, a little bit of praise at the beginning for actually moving in the right direction. And I think from 2013 onwards, like I think we've made major strides. And like I've acknowledged this a couple times here. You also opened up to ask like, what is wrong with this? Why can't we debate these things? And like, I didn't want to do this publicly with you, but you did open it up now. So, here's some suggestions. And like, please don't take this hard because I think, my intentions are to better the university and maybe provide some suggestions because I've been around for a long time with this. So number one, I actually do think that we need to divest from fossil fuels. I think the commitment was made, okay? I think that people are standing behind that. You can see all of these people coming out today because they actually do believe in that. If it's negative screening, if it's actually about ridding the portfolios, this is symbolic if you think of it that way. But the commitment was made, it needs to be abided by, okay? Number two, like I said, I don't think we're actually looking at divesting from other things that are quite important. Like, I don't want weapons in there, and BlackRock does invest in weapons. I don't know what's, the investment with the AI technology. I could see a marriage between war and AI technology also. I don't know, though. So, like, these are things that I'm not sure about. Which opens up another context. I think that we need more transparency. There's been a lot saying we're going to invest between 30 to 70% in environmental. First of all, the variance is crazy there. Second of all, we need better metrics. And I know that you're developing them right now, but I think we need transparency on these metrics. I also think we need transparency on more of the portfolio. This is the first time that we've had this addressed with students and faculty in an open session. And look, Mark, you're putting yourself on the spot here. I understand that this is a very difficult position to have. And I know that you're not the one making all the decisions. You have to pass this through the foundation, so it's not like your responsibility of all these things, but we do need to have these addressed in public forums. There is an issue with carbon neutrality, okay? If you actually look at the technology of carbon capturing, it's not to the forefront of actually making major changes. Like I was saying, carbon sequestering investments are problematic also. They could actually be part of land grabs. Putting carbons back into the ocean actually causes acidification. There's so many issues with that. I think we need to look at not even just a carbon neutral portfolio, but a carbon negative portfolio. We're actually way exceeded the amount of carbons in our atmosphere. We should actually be projecting negative, not neutral. I think that transparency needs to be addressed and we need to have continuous updates about these things. I think a lot of the frustration that I'm hearing coming from the audience is really about not really understanding what the university's position is, but at the same time not being communicated to. So there's a lot of lack of understanding when it comes to this topic, and there was a commitment made that people are still actually trying to hold the university to. I talked about metrics. They're not necessarily clear. I really hope, Mark, that the metrics are going to become more clear by 2022 or 2024, 25. Sorry, 22, I'm like lost my I think that we need to actually be more aligned with social justice causes. And we talk a lot about sustainability, but sustainability is not really sustainable unless we actually look at like social justice. And like I'm saying, there's incommensurability sometimes between what finance can do because these are market-based solutions and what really needs to be done on the ground. Now, part of these recommendations, I would really love to actually have, like Charlotte, you're saying, geography professors, geography students, also part of these discussions as well, because some of these professors actually understand the environmental impacts, not necessarily just from a finance perspective, but really actually understand the crux and real tangible solutions to these problems. So I think there needs to be more than just finance people in the room discussing these things. These are, I think, just basic kind of little criticisms that I think will make a big impact if we start to address some of these issues. Anyhow, that's just my 2 cents to all of this as well. And hopefully we do discuss this at the JCAC committee or in open public forums like this.
So I'd just like to address the conversation we were just having with Charlotte. And It seems to be that you don't fully appreciate why we care about divestment so much specifically. So this plan that I do agree with, it seems that you've been working on this quite hard, and potentially from a climate change perspective it's even more impactful. But from I'd say from a university scale, global climate change, from a university scale, the investment is a symbolic gesture, but I think that's the point. It's a message. The power is in the symbolism. We're not gonna kill fossil fuels tomorrow, like the professor was saying. That's obviously not gonna happen. Concordia divesting from fossil fuels is not gonna do that. But I would argue that a university is a future-building institution. We're educating young people. We're doing research to potentially make the world a better place. Why are we not aligning ourselves in terms of divesting fossil fuels with that? I think if the university completely divests from fossil fuels, it's not that we're going to save the world tomorrow, it's that we are sending a message as an institution, as a student body, of putting our money where our mouth is and the kind of world that we want to see, and taking money away from an industry that's still building infrastructure, is going to run for decades, it's destroying the planet. I think the whole point of this is that it's sending a message and it's creating a symbol. It's not, and I don't think it's mutually exclusive with the plan you have. If it has more impact than the original plan, that's great, but why does that have to exclude divestment? And don't you agree that there's a lot of power in the symbolism of divestment?
What do we want? What do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate justice! What do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate justice! What do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate justice! What do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate justice! What do we want it? Now! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey, no pipelines on stolen land! 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 Climate justice is what we need, not billionaires and corporate greed.
Climate justice is what we need, not billionaires and corporate greed. Climate justice is what we need, not billionaires and corporate greed. Climate justice is what we need, not billionaires and corporate greed. Climate justice is what we need, not billionaires and corporate greed. Climate justice is what we need, not billionaires and corporate greed. Climate justice is what we need, not billionaires or corporate greed.
Divest! Divest!
Divest! Please.
When I say greenwashing, you say fuck off. Greenwashing.
Fuck off.
Greenwashing.
Fuck off.
Greenwashing.
Fuck off.
Greenwashing.
Fuck off.
When I say greenwashing, you say fuck off. Greenwashing.
Fuck off.
Greenwashing.
Fuck off.
Greenwashing.
Fuck off.
Greenwashing.
Fuck off.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to all of our panelists. We do genuinely appreciate the time you put into this. And some students are going to be heading down to Reggies to have further discussions and drinks and talk about the future of sustainability at Concordia. So thanks everybody.